Today is Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Today is day 2 of Donald Trump's second impeachment trial. Man, the Democrats are blistering Donald Trump. Wait until we show you the newest video, including how Eugene Goodman, the black Capitol Hill cop, actually saved for Senator Mitt Romney. So we talked with Simone Sanders, of course, senior advisor, chief spokesperson for Vice President Kamala Harris, about American Rescue Plan and COVID-19. In Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, the teachers union, have a good deal to open schools for in-person classes beginning tomorrow. A woman last seen with Quawan balls, the teen who was found in the sugarcane field in Louisiana, brutally murdered, now facing charges of disappearance. Wells Fargo announced that it will invest $50 million in black-owned banks. $50 million? What are y'all doing with black-owned media? 4 Louisiana troopers are facing charges after investigation found they participated in practices of excessive force. Utah, parents of students attending Family White Academy have dropped their request for their children to opt out of Black Month curriculum after a massive blow. And PepsiCo's officially removed Aunt Jemima from its pets and syrup. We'll show you the goal. Plus, we'll speak with one of the curators of Come See About Me, the Mary Wilson Supreme Coalition, which came at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. Plus, we'll check in with a woman who created a black tech company in order to help young students excel in math and science. Folks, it is time to bring Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin!
All right, folks. House impeachment managers argued today that former President Donald Trump began grooming his MAGA supporters months before the horrific events placed in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. In their presentation, the managers used tweets and retweets where Trump was showing his cavalry that the election was stolen and the results were flipped. Representative Nagase used direct quotes. Fighters who said they dared to kill members of Congress and that they were following the president's orders. Woman Stacey Plaskett introduced security footage never been seen before, depicting the chaos Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Vice President Pence, and members of Congress had to endure. Watch this.
Now, some have said that President Trump's remarks, his speech on January 6th, was just a speech. Well, let me ask you this. When in our history has a speech led thousands of people to storm our nation's capital with weapons, to scale the walls, break windows, kill a Capitol police officer? This was not just a speech. It didn't just happen. And as you evaluate the facts present to you, it will become clear exactly where that mob came from. Because here's the thing, President Trump's words, as you'll see on January 6th, in that speech, just like mob's actions, were carefully chosen. Those words had a very specific meaning to that crowd. And how do we know this? Because in the weeks prior to, during, and after the election, he used the same words over and over and over. You will hear over and over 3 things. You can see them on the screens. First, what lead manager Rask referred to, the big lie, that the election was stolen, full of fraud, rigged. You will hear over and over him using that lie to urge his supporters to never concede and stop the steal.
It's the only way we can lose, in my opinion, is massive fraud.
We all know what happened after that. He lost. He lost the election. But remember, he had that no-lose scenario referenced earlier. He told his base that the election was stolen, as he had forecasted. And then he told them, your election has been stolen, but you cannot concede. You must stop the steal.
You can't let another person steal that election from you. All over the country, people are together and holding up signs, stop the steal. The Democrats are trying to steal the White House. You cannot let them. You just can't let them.
Now, while he's inciting his supporters, he's also simultaneously doing everything he possibly can to overturn the election. First, he begins with the courts, a legitimate avenue to challenge the election. But he ignores all of their adverse rulings when all of his claims are thrown out. Then he moves on to trying to pressure state election officials to block the election results of his opponent, even though he'd lost in their states. You'll hear my fellow manager discuss that in detail. Then he tries to threaten state election officials to actually change the votes, to make him the winner, even threatening criminal penalties if they refused.
Here today do not want to see our election victory stolen. There's never been anything like this. It's a pure theft in American history. Everybody knows it. Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country.
Now, of course, each of you heard those words before. So had the crowd. The president had spent months telling his supporters the election had been stolen, and he used this speech to incite them further, to inflame them, to stop the steal, to stop the certification of the election results.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. We must stop the steal.
Finally, the president used this speech as a call to arms. It was not rhetorical. Some of his supporters had been primed for this over many months. As you'll learn, days before his speech, his lead manager Raskin noted, there were vast reports across all major media outlets that thousands of people would be armed, that they'd be violent. You'll learn that Capitol Police and the FBI reported in the days leading up to the attack that thousands in the crowd were targeting the Capitol specifically, that they had arrested people with guns the night before the attack on weapons charges. And this is what our commander-in-chief said to the crowd in the face of those warnings right before they came here.
We will not let them silence your voices. We're not going to let it happen. Not going to let it happen.
But because they believed that they were following his orders, they said so.
I thought I was following my president. I thought I was following what we were called to do.
President Trump requested that we be in D.C. on the 6th.
You heard it from them. They were doing what he wanted them to do. They wouldn't have listened to you, to me, to the Vice President of the United States, who they were attacking. They didn't stop in the face of law enforcement, police officers fighting for their lives to stop them. They were following the president. He alone, our commander-in-chief, had the power to stop it. And he didn't. 5 people lost their lives on that terrible, tragic day. A woman was shot dead 50 feet from where we later certified the election results. And for those who question just how bad it was, criminal complaints recently unsealed by the Department of Justice are more than revealing. You'll see one of these documents on the screen. In the charging affidavit, the leaders of the Proud Boys, we learned that members of this group said, I'm going to quote, they would have killed Mike Pence if given the chance. In another, learned of a tweet in real time. We were in the building. We broke into Capitol. We got inside. We did our. We were looking for Pelosi to shoot her in the frickin' brain, but we didn't. And for anyone who suggests otherwise, these defendants themselves have told you exactly why they were here. You'll see this in the trial. That in the halls of the Capitol, on social media, in news views, and in charging documents, they confirm they were following the president's orders.
Folks, the brutal breakdown of what took place was shown by Stacey Plaskett as she unveiled never before seen footage of what took place in Capitol in security footage from the government. Watch.
The video is from the west front of the Capitol on the Senate side, the side facing the White House. Watch the red dot, which moves up the lower steps of the Capitol, indicating the approximate location of the rioters as they surge past the police. The other officers waiting down the hall. The rioters seen carrying a baseball bat in video is the same one we saw moments ago breaching the window on the first floor. While all of this was going on, Vice President Pence was still in the room near the Senate chamber. It was not until 2:26 that he was evacuated to a secure location. This next security video shows that evacuation. His movements are depicted by the orange dot in our model. The red and blue dots represents the location where the mob and Officer Goodman were, and where Officer Goodman led the mob away from the chamber just moments ago. You can see Vice President Pence and his family quickly move down the stairs. The Vice President turns around briefly as he's headed down. As Pence was being evacuated, rioters started to spread throughout the Capitol. Those inside helped other rioters break in through doors in several locations around this entire building. And the mob was looking for Vice President Pence because of his patriotism. Because the Vice President had refused to do what the President demanded and overturn the election results. Speaker Pelosi's staff heeded the call to shelter in place. On our model, you can see the rioters in the rotunda in red and the Speaker's office again in orange. So this is a security video, so there is no sound. As you can see here, the staff moves from their offices through the halls and then enters a door on the right-hand side. That's the outer door of a conference room, which also has an inner door that they barricaded with furniture. The staff then hid under a conference room table in that inner room. This is the last staffer going in and then barricading themselves inside of the inner office. After just 7 minutes of them barricading themselves and the last staffer entering the door on the right, a group of rioters enter the hallway outside. And once inside, the rioters have free reign in the Speaker of the House's offices. In security video, pay attention to the door that we saw those staffers leading into and going into. One of the rioters you can see is throwing his body against the door 3 times until he breaks open that outer door. Luckily, when faced with the inner door, he moves on. Trump's mob ransacked the Speaker of the House office. They terrorized her staff. Again, that is a mob that was sent by the President of the United States to stop certification of an election. The Vice President, Speaker of the House, the first and second in line to the presidency, were performing their constitutional duties, presiding over the election certification, and they were put in danger because President Trump put his own desires, his own need for power over his duty to the Constitution and our democratic process. President Trump put a target on their backs, and his mob broke into the Capitol to hunt them down.
It's chilling. Let's break down with our, certainly glad to have everybody. Robert Patillo, of course, Rainbow Coalition Peachtree Street Project there in Atlanta. Monique Presley, your crisis manager, and as well as Mustafa Santiago Ali, of course, friendly with the EPA as well. Let's, Robert, let's go through this. Look, if you're Donald Trump, this was a real trial. The jury could probably go in the room, take a seat, go to the bathroom, drink of water, come back, convict this fool 5 minutes, come out, give the decision, and be home in time to watch their favorite television show. It is clear cut. There is no denying what Donald Trump did. This exposes the shamefulness and how despicable the Republican Party is in that 54 senators. Senator Lindsey Graham has already said, he's called Trump and said, don't worry about it, you'll be cleared. What they're basically saying is there is nothing a president can do that warrants convicted. He can literally lead an insurrection, and they're perfectly with it as long as there's an R in front of it.
Well, you're right, and it opens up a very weird legal situation where the more evidence out, I think I watched every single minute of the coverage today, and much like everyone else, I realized that this was far more significant than even the general public understood. Seeing how close those murderers were, the mob was to Senator Romney, getting into the chambers and so on and so forth. And so the question is for the president's defense team: do you agree to the impeachment in exchange for an immunity deal? And what I mean by that is, do you plead to these charges at this point? Because as a defense attorney, if I saw this mountain of evidence rolling before I even do my opening arguments, basically what the Senate is opening the door for is the District of Columbia or the Justice Department to prosecute President Trump in his individual capacity, as they're making this argument that he's an individual citizen, that he should not. The entire argument yesterday about the constitutionality of prosecuting a president. If your argument that he should not be subject to the Article 1 and 2 authority of Congress, then you're kicking it over to the court system, which opens it up Department of Justice and Merrick Garland as the Attorney General to prosecute using all this evidence that was used at this impeachment trial. And the penalties for a felony conviction on federal charges are far worse than the penalty for being convicted by the Senate. So I do have to wonder at this point, will the president's counsel inform him that things could be a lot worse? Fonnie Willis, the new district attorney here in Fulton County in Atlanta, is also opening up a criminal investigation to President Trump over the call that he made to the Secretary of State here. So there are many criminal charges that are coming down lines, and maybe it's time for Trump's team to pull that ejection seat button and figure out if they can make a deal to save him from jail. Forget about the whole not being able to run for office thing. At this point, he needs to be worried about spending the next 5 to 10 years behind bars.
Bottom line, Mike, what the Democrats are methodically exposing, they are exposing the sheer insanity of Republicans to say, this is really no big deal. this is, for Tucker Carlson last night, this is just a waste of time. I mean, they are flippantly dismissing this. When you hear Congressman Swalwell say he walked it up, they were 58 steps away from where the rioters were. Mitt Romney, Eugene Goodman is saying, no, go this way. Romney was walking to these folks. To hear the audio of them saying, where's Nancy? Where's Pence? Them saying we're going to kill them. I mean, you're watching and listening to that and you're going, my God.
Yes, well, obviously, at one point, I think I just texted you and said, this is jarring. And that's all that I could say about it. And I've been around a while and I've seen lots of things. Well, let me get some things out first. Good job, brava, Speaker Pelosi, on once again assembling a dynamic, stellar, brilliant, prepared, experienced, learned team of lawyers, because these are some trial lawyers we're looking at who know what it means to try a case and try it to win. And you can tell they went deep into their reserves in order to spend the money, do the work, burn the midnight oil to take advantage of all of the forms of evidence that would make no sense for a trial of this sort. So, for instance, you can have all different kinds of evidence at a trial: real evidence, demonstrable evidence, demonstrative evidence. You can use technical skills for the evidence. Well, this is largely video, but video that in a regular trial would be considered demonstrative really here is real, meaning you feel it, you hear it, you can almost touch it. It's better than if they had the taser in the room that they circle and show the guy with his feet kicked up on Speaker Pelosi's desk. It's better than if we could see the metal bat actually in the Capitol as they're presenting the trial, because they're using graphics, they're using specially created digital examples in order to track what the insurgents were doing. And it is just very, very well done. I hope that people who are watching see this and understand the difference between what they're seeing now and that hot mess of a display that they saw from General Castor and his sidekick Sean yesterday, because that's not trial lawyering, and I don't know what any of that was even about. I don't have anything else to say about it. But what we're seeing is excellent. What they have to do now, though, is make sure that in all the excellence of it, we just don't know the horrors of what happened that day. Nobody can argue that. And especially after we've seen all of this evidence, forget about it. To stand and say it wasn't a big deal. And these jurors know full well what it was because they lived through it. But we got to go from there to connect the dots that make it such that former President Trump is responsible. And that's very different than if it was you, Roland, who was up at the microphone, or if it was Robert, or if it was me. What I need to hear from them is, because he was the commander in chief, and as they said for a little bit this morning, he stopped being commander in chief, turned into insider in chief. That's fine. But he held the most powerful office in the land. And they need that in order to prove up that people with their own will, with their own decision making, with their own ability to decide to commit crimes or to work in concert to commit them, were only doing it because they were told to, and that the person who told them to do it is ultimately responsible. And that's a legal hurdle. And that's a very different legal hurdle than if it was just, a normal citizen. So I hear what Robert is saying. I don't necessarily agree. I don't know why, as a prosecutor in D.C., I would give up my opportunity to try him. I don't know why I would do that negotiating, because if I bring forward my case and end up getting a settlement, he can't run for president anyway, because now he's a convicted felon. So no, I keep all my bites at this apple. No. He's going to stand trial, and he's going to stand trial, and then he's going to stand trial. He's just going to keep standing trial. Georgia, New York, D.C., you name it.
And I think that's critically important, Mustafa, because he needs to pay. Every single legal effort, whether it is in New York by Tish James, whether it is the DA there in Georgia, every single one he needs to pay. And the people who were involved in this insurrection, they all go to prison. Because if you don't, what you're saying is you can go even further and then we might think about penalizing you. What's further? Literally holding members of Congress hostage? That's literally what's next. That's the next step. And that's why these Republicans are so shameful. And I'm telling you right now, my position is very simple. If any Republican vote to acquit Donald Trump, they are basically dead to me. I don't want to hear anything from any of them on any topic. I'm not trying to unify with any of them. I'm not trying to negotiate with any of them. If members of the media had any guts, they would actually say, if you are a Republican and after this display, you vote to acquit him, you're not welcome on our Sunday morning shows. You're not going to be provided a platform. These people literally are saying, we will suck up to Donald Trump so much that we will let this man get away with this under the guise of, oh, we just think this is unconstitutional. He's a private citizen. This has just gone a little too far.
I mean, yeah, it's most definitely gone far enough. Those folks, our Republican brothers and sisters who went through this and experienced it also, and that evening when they went back home, if they had family that was in the area or they got on the phone and called them, they have to remember that they literally almost lost their lives, that Donald Trump is willing to sacrifice anyone for his agenda. And he's been doing it throughout his 4 years that he was in office. You saw it time and time and time again. And he realized that he was a Pied Piper, that he could create chaos in situations when he wanted to deflect or when he wanted folks to do something, that he could, create pain, could create death. And we saw death both in this instance, but we've seen death throughout the coronavirus and many other actions that he's done. So folks have to add this up, the totality of this, and I understand they have to stay focused on the set of charges that are in front of them. But if someone is willing to sacrifice you just so they think that they could get a shot at being continue to be the president, even though all of the cases, 61 cases, I believe, and they lost 60 of the 61 cases that, all the respective judges said, there is no, foul play that's going on in relationship to voting. These folks were really willing to take your life because of what he said. So if you're willing to sign off on that, then, not only are you failing that oath that you took, you're failing your family. You're failing many of the communities where you come from as well. So he has to be convicted, because if he doesn't, it says something about our democracy and our country. And it also says something about these individuals who have to go because they're placing, their own sets of needs above country. So we'll see how it all plays out. But, it's very clear that he has to go, that he has to be convicted. And as Monique said, there is a laundry list of other cases on the state level that, people have very, very strong cases against him.
And part of the problem here is unlike other impeachment hearings, now it's sort of like, yeah, we'll cover some of it, not all of it. It's being covered some on cable news right now. Go live to the United States Senate right to get a peek of what is being discussed by impeachment managers.
Picked up your phone and tried to reach somebody at the White House to ask for help. This wasn't partisan politics. These were Americans from all sides trying to force our commander-in-chief to protect and defend our country. He was required to do that. Now, the extent of how many people tried to reach the president to get him to act is not known. But what is clear, what we know without any doubt, is that from the very beginning, the people around Donald Trump lobbied him to take command. What's also clear is what Donald Trump, our commander-in-chief, did in those initial hours to protect us. Nothing. Not a thing. He knew it was happening. The attack was on TV. We all know that President Trump had the power to stop these attacks. He was our commander-in-chief. He had the power to assess the security situation, send backup, send help. He also had incited this violent attack.
They were listening to him. He could have commanded them to leave. But he didn't. The first critical hour and a half of this bloody attack, Donald Trump tweeted his rally speech and did nothing else. We know why. We know his state of mind that prompted his utter, complete refusal to defend us. It was reported by those around him. The president, as reported by sources at the time, was delighted. As he watched the violence unfold, the president reportedly, and I quote, "born enthusiastic," meant the certification was being derailed, end quote. Senator Ben Sasse related a conversation with senior White House officials that President Trump was, quote, "walking around the White House, confused about why other people on his team weren't as excited as he was," end quote. Trump's reaction to this attack reportedly genuinely freaked people out. I understand why. We just suffered a very serious attack on our country. And we saw it, and the people around him knew it. But when Donald Trump saw it, he was delighted. Now, what President Trump did next confirms why he was so delighted, why he wanted this. Because it shows that his singular focus that day, the day we were attacked, was not protecting us, was not protecting you, was not protecting Capitol. It was stopping the certification of the election results. The evidence is clear. Shortly after 2 p.m., as the siege was fully underway, then President Trump made a call. This is the first call that we're aware he made to anyone inside the Capitol during the attack. Didn't call Vice President to ask how he could help defend the Capitol. Didn't call the next two in line to the succession of the presidency to check on their safety or well-being. Instead, he attempted to call Senator Tuberville. He dialed Senator Lee by accident. As Senator Lee describes it, he had just ended a prayer with colleagues here in the Senate chamber, and the phone rang, Donald Trump. And how Senator Lee explains that the phone call goes something like this: "Hey, Tommy," Trump asks, and Senator Lee says, "This isn't Tommy," and he hands the phone to Senator Tuberville. Senator Lee confirmed that he stood by as Senator Tuberville and Trump spoke on the phone. And on that call, Donald Trump reportedly asked Senator Tuberville to make additional objections to the certification. That's why he called. Now, let's be clear, at roughly 2 p.m., when Donald Trump was walking around the White House, watching TV delighted, and spent 5-10 minutes talking to Senator Tuberville, urging him to delay the election results, this is what was happening in the Capitol.
We'll pause.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
You saw Senator Langford stop speaking and leave the floor quickly in that clip because the insurgents had broken through the barricades and had entered the building. And as these armed insurrectionists banged on the doors, members of Congress were told to put on their gas masks, to put bags over their heads for safety and prepare to evacuate. And Donald Trump was calling to ask.
This is why this is critical right here. And this is a strange, not real trial, Monique. You see him standing there saying Donald Trump called Tommy Tuberville, who's sitting his ass in the chamber. If this was a trial, you would say, we have a witness. They showed the tweets from the story from Kevin McCarthy. They would have said, we have Kevin McCarthy as a witness. Republicans yelled, oh, if you dare call witnesses, we're going to call our own. We're going to call Vice President Kamala Harris. We're going to call, which was also stupid. But imagine a person who's sitting there who can confirm, yes, he called me and didn't want to talk about what was happening. He wanted me to further delay it. Literally sitting there, he's one of the jurors. So a witness is one of the jurors.
Well, no. Every juror is a witness.
Right.
All the lawyers are witnesses.
Right, but I'm saying, but specifically, the argument he's laying out, Trump calls Tuberville, and Tuberville is sitting right there.
Of course, but the thing is, they're not punked into not calling him. They know it's a waste of time because you put any of them on the stand, you get more information. And that's the assessment that a trial lawyer makes all the time. You may have a witness list that has 72 people on it. You may call 6 because you want witnesses where you know you're going to get the stuff you do want, especially if you're calling them. I can't do nothing about what those other folks call. I got a cross-examination waiting for him. I'll do the best I can. I'll object during direct. But when it's my witness, I'm responsible if I call a witness and they get up there and act a plumb fool. And you are guaranteed that as a House manager, if you call a GOP senator as a witness, you're going to get mouthfuls of things you don't want for every one little bite of what you do. So this is much more effective. And if it was a lie, they would object. They would file motions. No motions were filed after yesterday. None will be filed after tonight. That's the way that process works. So yes, normally lawyers wouldn't be almost having a fight breaking down because they're fact witnesses in their own cases, the way these House managers are. These are very special circumstances, but also, there are no rules of evidence. This isn't a legal court of law. That's why it's important that they can make their decisions based on what they hear, whether it follows the federal rules of evidence or not. It's not required. Whether it's a criminal violation or not, it's not required. They can vote. They can vote their conscience. And that's the other thing that I want to say. All these constitutional arguments that the Republican senators are putting up, I just don't believe we should be here. I don't believe that this is constitutional to have an impeachment trial when a president is no longer in office. Boo. That ship sailed yesterday with a vote. Your obligation now is to be a trier of fact, to listen to the evidence and to decide based on the evidence. If former President Trump was wrongfully voted against and shouldn't be taken to trial, he has vehicles in order to object to that.
Got it.
He has a way of recourse.
Robert,
so they got to listen to these facts and vote.
Robert, go ahead.
Well, and particularly to Monique's point, let's realize that some of these congressmen and senators are victims in the case. Some are victims and witnesses. Some of them are accomplices who are there also, like Ted Cruz and Joe Hawley. And so, of course, this process is not going to be fair. Of course, the process is not going to be judicial. There are no federal rules of evidence, all those sorts of things. But circling back, I do think that the House Democrat, or what the House Democrats are doing, what the managers are doing, are putting alley-oop up there to every single prosecutor in this country that may need evidence. They're showing them that if there's some MAGA supporters in their hometown who are at the Capitol, here is all the evidence you need to prosecute them, and particularly for President Trump, they're letting him know that, look, the Southern of New York will be coming after you. The Department of Justice will be coming after you. Fulton County will be coming after you. More likely, there will be additional jurisdictions when we find out what other states, Donald made those sorts of phone calls, will be coming after you. I think at this point, it's a fait accompli that regardless of what the GOP vote is on this, all we're doing is putting on record how many United States senators would put the president above themselves, above the Constitution, above this country, above rule of law. And so it's going to be very difficult for those people. If we aren't seeing 44 or 45 primary challengers and then general election challengers coming up in the next couple of years in these Senate elections, I'll be very surprised because these senators are now on record and they'll either be challenged from the far right, from the Trump wing of the party, or they'll get a Democratic senator who will be so appalled by the way that they've conducted themselves that they'll have every reason against them.
But Robert, what are their constituents saying?
Easy. They're saying, yay, Trump, yay.
Well, no, but I guess that's my point. I believe that senators in a situation like this, they've been elected, and so now they vote their conscience, right? But senators are saying that they have an obligation to vote along the lines of their constituency. So I don't know about all of these different challengers in those jurisdictions where the citizens are really like.
Look, at the end of the day, Mustafa, this party is the Trump party. The Trump party is the Republican Party. Here's the deal. If they show us they have no conscience, they have no integrity, they have no decency, well, then they have exposed who they are. And that's why I say they're dead to me. I don't hear anything from them. There's nothing they can say to me. There's absolutely nothing that they can say to me. I don't want to hear them talk about unity or can we all come together. The answer is no.
They took the same oath that I took. So they make a decision. They're going to live up to that oath. If they're actually going to honor the Constitution, if they're going to honor democracy. And if they don't, then like you said, they're of no value.
Simple as that. Got to go to a break, folks. When we come back, we will talk with Mark Anthony about, of course, the Supreme Mayor Wilson and what he did with her when it came to collection that's there in. So we will talk to him right here on Roland Martin Filtered. You do know that there is not a piece of your life that government in some way does not involve. I mean, I crack up with these conservatives who talk about
down to your name.
Everything.
Down to your name.
Everything. I mean, just if you actually sat down and said, okay, what part of my life? Let me try to find something in my life that government in does not have a part of. I can't think of a single thing. You can say, fine, they don't impact my marriage. Yes, they do. Because you got to get that marriage license.
Yep. From the birth to the tomb. And if you're going to be here in the United States of America, whether you like it or not, you got to know about it. You got to know its history. Because when somebody knows about you more than you know yourself, that's slavery. That's volunteer slavery. Yeah. So it's almost like double the education we got to pick up of what this place is all about, how it works, how it runs. I'm a firm believer, being in 112 countries, that you got to think global and act local. But you better ACT, act local.
This is the case of America versus Donald J. Trump. Article 1, incitement of insurrection.
Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting violence against the government of the United States.
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
There's a billion of us out there, and we are listening to Trump.
Non-stop lies regarding election fraud the courts proved was non-existent.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes.
The evidence is all there for the world, G. This is not a vote of conscience. It's a vote for truth. Where do you stand, senators? With Trump? With the truth?
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
What's up, y'all? I'm Will Packer.
Hello, I'm Bishop TVJ.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Many folks are still reeling from the death of Supreme's founder, Mary Wilson. Passed away a couple days ago, 76. Today, I talked with Williams, who is one of the last surviving Original Temptation. We will share that interview with him tomorrow. I saw this post from Mark Anthony Neal. He posted this here on Twitter. I was honored to spend some time with Wilson when I helped Come See About Me, the Mary Wilson Supreme's collection, an exhibition of the gowns worn by the Supreme at the Museum in 2013. Was like being around royalty. Of course, it is a nation's dedicated to preserving culture, part of African Americans, and of course, that exhibit that took place when they opened in 2000. And so he joins us right now. Mark, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, Roland? Good to see you.
Looks like, first of all, it's like I swear I saw you all weekend when I looked at the Netflix remastered documentary on the two deaths of Sam Cooke, which was a really great documentary, and so glad to have you here. You talked about it was like being around royalty. How so?
Yeah, I was only around her a couple of times. We had lunch, and obviously when the show opened and as we were planning for it. But, this is the thing, the Supremes represented royalty to Black America for such a long time. And many folks will think of Diana Ross as being the essence of the Supremes. But it's really Mary Wilson, right? Because she was there when they were first the Primettes back in Detroit and the Brewster Douglas houses, back in 1958. And she was with the group until the group ended in 1978, right? So she was always there. And, she really embodied the message that, folks could come up in the world. They could make a person into themselves. They could create an identity. And she did that for the longest time, and it was representative of this idea of Black glamour. And it was really Mary Wilson who understood the value of these Bob Mackie dresses that had been designed by the Supremes in the 1960s, many of them iconic. And she understood the value of them and began to think of a way to take them around the country so other folks could see those gowns. And I was fortunate that Patricia Wilson Aiden, asked me to come in and help curate the gowns back in 2013. And it was a marvelous show and a marvelous exhibit. And really a great opportunity to see the greatness of the Supremes.
Also, I think, let's just, if B.B. King was the caretaker of the blues, in essence, the worldwide ambassador, the reason we still celebrate and pay such homage to the Supremes is because of Mary Wilson. I mean, when Diana Ross leaves, Flo Ballard dies, and sure, you had Sidney Birdsong, but it was Mary Wilson who kept that thing alive. Then when the book came out, then she kept talking about them, making appearances. I mean, she was the caretaker of the legacy of the Supremes.
Oh, there's no question about that. That she was a person that really carried the bloodstained banner for what the Supremes represented and why they were important to American society. I mean, first, you think about her own memoir, but as recently as 2 years ago, she did a book that basically cataloged these wonderful gowns that they traveled around with and did these concerts, met with the Queen Mother back in 1968 in London. It was an amazing story for them to come up in the world the way that they did. And, Diana Ross left the Supremes in 1969, 1970, and she created her own legacy. But it was really Mary Wilson's job, really after Florence Ballard left the group and then, of course, died in 1976. It was her job to keep up that legacy.
And I think that, I think that's really important because, look, historic acts can very easily get thrown into the dustbin. They can pretty much just get ignored, and then we sort of move on. And I mean, if you look at the Temptations, the reality is with Otis Williams still being one of the original Temptations, carrying forth that legacy. So when you still see them performing, still hear them, you still have a tie to that group because he was. He is still living and he is still active, involved. We'll share it tomorrow where I talk to him about what it meant to be the glue that held them together. That's really what Mary Wilson also was. And the reason that's also important because Black culture often gets overtaken by white culture. Someone sent me an item. Someone sent me an item the other day, and this is a perfect example. Since I'm gonna tie Mary Wilson in with Sam Cooke, you might get a kick out of this, Mark. Let me find the text someone sent me. Variety posted a story that said, "For Black people, Sam Cooke's A Change Has Come was the Imagine of its time and today." A Change Is Gonna Come came out in '64. Imagine came out in '71. Maybe Imagine is the A Change is Gonna Come. You see, you saw how that.
It's the same thing with Questlove's new movie, that folks want to describe as the Black Woodstock. But, what they did in that park in Harlem in 1969 actually occurred 6 weeks before Woodstock. If anything, Woodstock was a version of the Harlem Cultural Festival.
Well, that's why for me, it's like folks say, Josh Gibson's the Black Babe Ruth. No, he actually was. He was before Babe. See, and that's what I just think that part of our responsibility, to me, as the caretakers of our history, and as Black journalists, as Black professors, as Black lawyers and doctors and Black environmentalists or whatever, is not allow Blackness to somehow be diminished and become second to whiteness. We said, no, we were the originators of that. Y'all then followed. We ain't about to follow y'all.
I mean, that's the incredible part of the story, that Berry Gordy built this empire in Motown, basically, pulling from the talent of Black kids growing up in working class Detroit. I mean, again, the Supremes at one time or the other, all three of those original Supremes lived in the Brewster Douglass houses. That was the first federally funded housing project in the United States. You go back to 1930s and you see Eleanor Roosevelt cutting the ribbons to it. It was synonymous for what housing projects look like. And the fact that they would come out of that, and you got the Temptations coming out of that same space, Marvin Gaye later, the fact that they became quintessentially not only Black culture, but what we think of as the best of American musical culture in the 1960s, right? There's no Beyonce and Destiny's Child without the Supremes. Supremes were the first female group to have 6 straight #1 records, to have a #1 album. They did so many things, and the fact that they've been able to maintain that legacy, going back to how great Mary Wilson has been with this, to be able to maintain that legacy for so long when, they weren't together to tour around the culture and talk about how great we were the Supremes. All of that is about the history of what they did, and it's still, untouched, 50 years later.
As somebody just posted on my YouTube channel, Meryl Streep is the white Cicely Tyson. That was Abasaki. That was a good right there. Cheryl Lee Raff talked about Mary Wilson was always fun-loving, but also was a diva. Was she quite particular with you in y'all meetings, or what she wanted to see done?
It was good because I always had the buffer of Miss Aiden Wilson, who was the CEO of the museum at the time. But, I knew not to cross any lines, right? I'm sitting there with Mary Wilson, right? I know where my place is. Yes, Miss Wilson, what do you need? Yes, Miss Wilson, we'll try to make sure that gets done. When you have folks of that stature, you just try not to mess it up, right? You want to represent them in the best way that they can be represented.
All right, Mark Anthony Neal, we certainly appreciate you sharing your thoughts about the passing of the legend, Mary Wilson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Again, folks, tomorrow, we want y'all to tune in to Roland Martin Unfiltered. I will have my interview with Otis, the last survivor, Original Temptation. The audio interview that we did, but you don't miss it. He shares some great things about growing up down from his longtime friend, Mary Wilson, talks about the Motown days. And remember in the movie The Temptations, when David Ruffin character said, Otis, ain't nobody buying tickets to see you? Did that actually happen in real life? Otis, give us the scoop. All right, here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Going to a break, and we come back. We'll about this strange case in Louisiana. Young black found dead. For the longest, the cops had not. This white woman and her son, who they suspect some involvement, she now has been arrested. We'll also hear from Sanders, who will talk about the American Recovery Act and what it means for African Americans. That is next. Roland Martin Unfiltered.
The U.S. uses more than half the world's healthcare resources, but we're ranked 43rd in the world for life expectancy. How did we get here? The political determinants of health include how we structure relationships, how we distribute resources, and how we administer power. What does this look like at the individual level? Take Jessica, for example. Jessica's 19. Her dad relies on mental health and substance use programs, but when these programs get cut, he becomes too difficult to live with. She leaves home. The neighborhood Jessica can afford has no grocery stores, limited public transit, and limited health care. To save money, policymakers change the water source to a more polluted river. Jessica has a minimum wage job with no health insurance at a convenience store that offers free snacks while she works, which she takes advantage of because they're free. When Jessica becomes pregnant, she can't get health insurance because pregnancy is a pre-existing condition. And she doesn't realize that the salty, fatty snacks that she eats at work are bad for her baby. Jessica gets a ride to the closest clinic for a prenatal appointment, but the doctor is rushed and rude to her. She doesn't go back. Jessica develops pre-eclampsia and almost dies her son's premature birth. He's born with cognitive defects because of poor diet, contaminated resource, and lack of access to prenatal care. As he grows up, Jessica learns that her school district doesn't have the resources to accommodate her son's special needs. He drops out after 8th grade and will repeat the cycle of poverty. Through Jessica's story, we begin to see how social determinants, environmental determinants, healthcare determinants, and behavioral health determinants take their toll on our lives. And Jessica's story shows us how political determinants supersede personal responsibility. Equity in our policies is a process and an outcome. Change comes when we can identify political champions at all levels and figure out how our most issues align with their policies. For more actionable solutions to close the health gap, read The Political Determinants of Health by Daniel E. Dawes.
I'm Bill Duke.
This is Diala Riddle, and you're watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered. Stay woke.
37-year-old Janet Irvin is now facing charges in the Quawan Bobby Charles case. The 15-year-old boy was found dead in a sugarcane field last November after investigators say Charles was last seen with Irvin and her 17-year-old son. According to the Iberia Sheriff's Office, Irvin is facing charges of contributing to the delinquency of a minor and for report a missing child. On October 30th, Irvin's son picked up outside of his father's home in Baldwin, Louisiana. Charles's parents said at the time didn't know Irvin or her son, never consented Charles leaving with them. Now, these charges come months after the family has been demanding Irvin be charged with Charles's disappearance. Charles' family says they believe law enforcement dragged her because Charles is black. For the family issued a statement on saying, quote, "We will continue to fight, we will continue to fight for Quawan, and we will work tirelessly in our pursuit of justice, transparency, and accountability." This is a very, very troublesome case, Monique.
Yes.
Y'all show it again. I am going to, so let me, I got to pull it up, but let me warn our audience. I'm going to show you the photo, but I'm warning folks, so I'm giving you about a 60 to 90 second head start. So I will literally show it in 2 minutes. But if you need to turn away, please do so. This young boy leaves. Y'all roll the footage, please. This is what he looks like. See in here what he looks like. But then I'm going to show you what it looked like when his body was found. And it never ended up in this case. My problem here is when the cops, initially when they got the call, their position was, oh, he's probably at a football game. Based on nothing, like nothing, then all of a sudden, it was different when his body was found. So she has not been charged with murder, but this is at least a start, Monique.
Yeah, they're still not there though yet. This one is sinister, and I don't know. I always, my gut told me the family knew more than they were saying, but law enforcement to me is complicit in this. And I just have had a feeling from the very beginning that a small circle of people knew exactly what happened and that some of them were in power and were not saying.
That is certainly the case, I believe, Robert, as well, because it made no sense whatsoever.
And it reminds me a lot of the Kendrick Johnson case here in Georgia, where community is demanding justice and the outside prosecution, they're demanding investigation. And we have this good old boy system of police officers and prosecutors, which is very difficult to find justice, particularly in small towns in America, without ability to bring national attention to the case. As I often do, I like to substitute our young black victim in this case for our fictional young white woman named Lori Light, who's the same man wearing a Girl Scout uniform or cheerleading uniform, depending on the situation. What would the national response be if that was Lily White who was missing? Would the police just say she's probably at a football game and put no more thought into it? Would there be no more national press attention on it? No, we know exactly what would have happened. Nancy Gray would have been down there. Anderson Cooper would be there. They would have helicopters, 24-hour coverage until they found out what happened. We have to do the same. This is why black media is so important. It's why black organizations are so important, because the only way to shine that bright light on subjects have people who care about it. And sunlight is the ultimate antiseptic, and when we pay attention to this case, the more likely justice is to be served.
And again, when we talk about Mustafa, what is so strange about this, and again, so folks, this is the warning, so please turn away if you like. On the left is Bobby Charles. On the right is how he was discovered. Missing, knocked out. I'm sorry, folks. That is shades of Emmett Till. Something clearly nefarious happened here, and this boy family have not gotten justice, Mustafa.
I thought of until, this just speaks to the disparities that we have in relationship with law enforcement. Everybody watches the first 48, and they understand if folks don't get real folks real quick, that you're likely not going to find whoever we think may have been murdered or assaulted. And we also know that when they said it themselves, when it comes to black boys, he probably at a football game, instead of assuming that he had been, taken away and getting the work done very quickly. So you got the two dynamics that are going on. You have this dehumanization of black boys and black girls and how they're viewed. And then you also got the that go on with law enforcement, where there are some who don't take their job as serious when it comes to black and brown bodies and getting engaged and putting the resources of their respective departments behind the search.
Again, so folks, we're going to keep updating you. We did reach out to the family attorney. Folks were under the weather, so we'll try to get them on as soon as we can. Let's stay in Louisiana, where on Monday, the Louisiana police arrested 4 state troopers accused of using excessive force, deactivating their body-worn cameras, and making false statements about 2 arrests in 2019 and 2020. A months-long investigation found 3 of the 4 troopers arrested on Monday include 26-year-old Harper, 28 Coda DeMoss, and 30-year-old Jacob Brown. All 3 troopers state charges of simple bat and malfeasance in office in connection with a police chase that took place in 2020. The other officer, 34-year-old Randall Dickerson, is accused of using excessive force, activating his body camera, and making false statements while handcuffing the driver in 2019. The newly appointed state police superintendent, Lamar Davis, said the use of in both instances was, quote, inexcusable and tarnishes the work of our dedicated and women. He told troopers in an obtained by the Associated Press, quote, although we once again face a situation that will undoubtedly bring negative public attention to our city, we must remain to holding each other accountable. That's what I'm talking about, Mustafa, when I keep saying when cops turn off those cameras. This is why I say, my line is, the moment you sign on, before you walk out that door, you turn it on, it should never come off again. If it's off, you turn it off, you should be terminated.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's the only way that we're going to be able to document what's going on. Whether it is, harassment or some of these other more egregious behaviors that we unfortunately find law enforcement doing. And even when we are able to document what's going on, it makes it really tough for folks like Robert, Monique, and many others to be able to get justice for their clients. So, we just got to continue to push on that. And the accountability thing in a statement is necessary. But, they have no problem when it comes to policing in our communities and making sure there's accountability. But, the police unions continue to push back and fight when we're asking for accountability to also be outside of the ledger.
Folks, I always love talking about community accountability, Robert, but hey, really, when you talk about it involving cops.
Well, this is why I still say that if you have a case where a body cam is deactivated, the case should be thrown out. Take away the incentive to have rent-seeking behavior. Take away the incentive that officers will have to turn off those body cams, because just like with anything else, let's put it this way. If you had a camera in your house and then you notice every time you go out of town, your spouse turns the camera off, after about the third or fourth time, you're going to be wondering why they turned the camera off. Same thing with these officers. Why are you turning the camera off? You are confident in the policing that you have done. And quite frankly, as we've said, technology exists today. You have tamper-proof body camera record directly to a cloud that are tamper-proof, where you cannot turn them on and off, that can stream 24 hours a day, that are set on an external server. So there's no reason for this not to be taking place already. And we have to push for federal funding and federal guidelines. Would say that if you not institute these policies with your state and local police forces, then you lose access to federal funding for weapons and trainings and other things that the federal government funds for local police departments, where all that military equipment keeps coming from. So it can be addressed on the federal level, but we do need to push for changes on the state and local level, where we have the most influence for public officials.
Well, I'm certainly glad to see that the actual state troopers arrested their own. You have a superintendent there, Monique, who's handling accountability.
Absolutely. That to me is the headline for this story, that we've got a department that knows this is going to bring a negative press. We're in it, and it should, because these are the things that need to be reported. But doing the right thing anyway, and not just the body cam. The to me more important part is these were 4 that had excessive force violations. that needed to be prosecuted. So these are humans who should not have been assaulted and battered by police officers that are now undergoing some form of justice. And these officers, perfectly, will never be able to be a part of law enforcement again.
Folks, let's talk now about the American Recovery Plan. President Joe Biden is pushing Congress all they can to help those who are in need. Now, granted, act like they can't do two things at once. The House is in session, but the Senate, of course, side with impeachment. Had a conversation with Roland Sanders, who works with Vice Kamala Harris's office, about what this means for African Americans. All right, Simone, this bill is critical. We lost 41% of our Black-owned businesses. African Americans are impacted. COVID, when you talk about the deaths. What would this American Rescue Plan specifically for African Americans?
Well, thank you so much for having me today, Roland. Just last week, the Vice President sat down with the Secretary of Treasury and members of the Black from across the country to discuss this very issue. Reality is this. Need relief right now. Black businesses all across this country can't afford to wait. So this American Rescue Plan is really a relief package, a survival plan for businesses across this country. November to December, 82,000 Black women moved out of the workforce. 8,000 Black women. As you know, before the pandemic, they were the fastest growing entrepreneurs. And so this plan provides relief to those Black businesses by ensuring that the next go around, when those checks are going, those PPP checks, Black businesses and those businesses who are really in need pushed to the front of the line, and Black primary at the back of the line. This bill ensures, and we'll work on CDFI. I know for some folks sounds like some complicated term, but it means a lot to Black businesses and small businesses across the board. Something that Secretary Yellen and the Vice President will be working together on. I could go on, Roland, but the reality is this: that we know that in businesses across the country, communities across the country have all been by COVID, but we know the effect is not equal. We know Black businesses, the African American community, community of color have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic, by this virus, both the economic crisis and the public health crisis. And the American Rescue Plan is a plan that seeks to provide some relief for this crisis.
Obviously, one of the issues that is significant is the $15 an hour living wage. And there's been lots of back and forth on that. Then, folks are also talking about means testing when it comes to the stimulus checks as well, the assist there. And so folks keep saying, are Democrats going to do what is necessary to thwart Republican efforts to stymie this and get this done?
Well, Roland, I can tell you that the president has been extremely clear about where he stands, both the $15 minimum wage and getting relief to families via these relief, as we're calling them, those payments to families. When it comes to the minimum wage, the president believes there's something that we have to do and that we have to work with Congress to do, which is why minimum wage, raising the minimum wage was in the plan we sent to the Hill, was in that original package for the American Rescue Plan. When it comes to these relief payments, direct checks, the president and vice president believe that we have to finish the job on the $2,000. What Congress did in December is not enough. $600 was just a down payment, and $1,400 will finish that job. Now, the president and vice president all believe that this relief needs to go to families and individuals that need it most, which means if you are making more than $300,000, upwards of $250,000, you are not someone that this relief will be targeted. So the president is committed to getting this done.
When we think about, again, what is happening across this country, for a lot of people, it is the illusion that things are bad. Donald Trump all focus on the stock market. Other folks will say, oh, no, that's an indication that things are going well. But so many people who are still hurting, who are still being impacted. Then you have folks out there, Larry Summers, and then you have former Senator Phil Gramm, who are saying, no, this bill is just too big. How does the White House respond to this notion that this bill is simply too big and it could hurt the economy?
Roland, the reality is that 11 million people have worked. 15 million folks are struggling to pay their rent, they're behind their rental payments. 12 million children are struggling with food insecurity. Folks are standing in food lines right now. The question on the table isn't, can we do too much? The question on the table is, can we afford to do too little? And President Biden and Vice President Harris believe that we can't do too little. We have to ensure the relief that is handed down to family communities across this country is sufficient. And that is exactly what the American Rescue Plan does. You know, the president designed this package with a number in mind. He designed it with the need of the American people in mind. So we believe that this package matches the scale of relief that is needed. We also believe that we need recovery, which is why in a few weeks' time, the president will lay out a plan for recovery of the American people, for jobs. But first, we have to do relief. And so that is what the American Rescue Plan does. And the president, vice president are currently working with Congress to get this passed and get that to the American people that greatly need in this urgent time.
Obviously, President Biden is going to be addressing Congress in a couple weeks. And so when you talk about that longer plan, I mean, this really is what is immediate and short term. And that next phase is critically important. One of the things that I have been really locked and loaded on and focused on my show has also been to ensure that African Americans are able to access the billions being spent annually by the federal government. A study was done a couple of years ago showing when it comes to media advertising in the government, $5 billion spent over 5 years. Black media is $51 million. When we see what's happened in the Department of Defense when it comes to contracts as well. And so when you talk about that long-term plan as well, will that also include massive changes to the federal government to say, wait a minute, here's the federal government spending these billions of dollars. How do we ensure African Americans are getting 10, 15% of these contracts? Because that also speaks to when you were able to fund black businesses. They're hiring African Americans. They have children. They have other family members. And so it's also building up black businesses and building up black wealth through accessing the federal government. Right now, we've been cut off in a huge way.
So, Roland, this is something, this question of equity, that's what I hear you talking about, equity as it relates to the federal government, really the entire administration's approach. And this is something that is of keen importance to the president and the vice president. So important, in fact, that the president signed an executive order on this very issue. Instituting a whole of government approach to addressing racial equity. A crisis of racial justice is one of the key 4 crises that the president and vice president, in advance of being sworn, laid out throughout the general election campaign and all throughout the transition. And when we talk about racial injustice, oftentimes people go directly to criminal justice reform. While that is just a part of it, there is something here, another piece. We talk about economic injustice, and if the president were sitting here now, he would tell you that if we only address criminal justice reform, we are only addressing part of the issue. We have to address the economic qualities as well. And so this whole of government approach the president signed his directive on is really saying that, look, it's not one person or one department or one agency to ensure that the administration is conducting itself in an equitable way across the board. It is on all of us. And so this approach will really be, this work will be anchored in the Domestic Policy Council, led by Ambassador Susan Rice, who is battle-tested, crisis-tested, and the president and vice president couldn't think of a person to take this issue and effort on. So yes, contracting, procurement, as you mentioned, will be part of that effort, and we'll hopefully have some more on this very soon to share and read out.
All right, and Simone Sanders, we appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Look to having you back, and can't wait. We can also get a chance to sit at with the vice president and the president about critically important issues for African Americans.
Absolutely noted, Roland. We will see you soon.
Thanks a bunch. Yeah, y'all see, I'm going to go ahead and get that recording while we there. Let's go back to our panel here. Mustafa, I want to start with you. We talk about that whole issue of race equity. The thing, I always get a kick out of these people, these wannabes out here who don't know nothing about the law. I got some fools out there doing little videos talking about, oh, look at this, Biden did this specifically for the Asians, not realizing that actually it dealt with the issue of discrimination and the Department of Justice, and so you have leeway there. But when you start talking about contracts, the Supreme Court decision is there when it comes to how you can use race specifically in contracts. But excuse me, because I actually read a book or two or 1,000. Some folks don't. But I do think it's important for us when we're having the conversation, what we should be doing is saying, how far can we go when it comes to the issue of race and driving race equity? Because you have to figure out the precise language to use so it withstands court scrutiny and doesn't get shut down.
Yeah, and if we don't do that, we're going to lose out on literally billions of dollars that could be going inside of our communities. First of all, let me just say I appreciate the Biden administration is currently doing with a number of the various policies and orders that they put out there. But I also want them, I've shared with who I work with that, equity and justice, similarities, but there are also some differences there in making sure that we are also addressing the past egregious actions that happened that have actually disinvested and removed wealth from our communities. So I appreciate, that they're focusing on Black businesses in general. But we also got to understand that as we are getting these funds now in place for what's happening in this moment, there are a whole lot of folks who have lost businesses that we have to also address that to make sure that, we can help to make them whole. When we're talking about $15 an hour and the fight that's going on with that, which is ridiculous, because we're talking about $32,000, a little less than $30,000 a year. There are a number of other dynamics that go, even if we can get folks to that $15 an hour. So we're going to push and fight to hopefully be able to make that happen. It should happen inside of this relief bill, because I'm feeling that if we take it to Capitol Hill, we run into some real challenges there. But you raised an important part, Roland, is that this huge amount of money, we've always had a difficult time in getting a fair share of the percentages, and some of the cases that were there before created, some of the challenges. But we now have $2 trillion that's a part of the climate economy, and 40% of that is supposed to go to communities of color. The question is, how do we help people to get prepared to be able to fully compete for those dollars, and then also build the necessary criteria in so that, as many people have said, that they get a chance to move to the front of the line, especially since coming from communities that have been disinvested in. So that's that dance that we have to do, but a whole lot of people are going to have to stay engaged. You're going to have to work with people who understand policy and who understand how we can build the right criteria in there so that folks actually have a fair shake in many of these dollars that are coming. Because if you don't, there are others who already position themselves to get these resources. And if you understand federal government and down to the state works, if you hit bottlenecks, then folks will redirect those dollars to places of least resistance, if you will. So we've got to make sure we really understand this game and that we are being educated and getting activated so you get those resources.
See, the thing for me, Robert, that really bugs me the most is when you have who don't know what the hell they're talking about popping off, and you got other people who are also less informed, who don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so you got Black folks running around, well, why can't they should do this, do that. You think all of a sudden you the brightest bulb in the room and your ass just the one figured that out? That if it could be done, a very specific remedy like that didn't happen before, like so you just so brilliant that is your idea. Well, just show me then how it can actually be done then. That's how I challenge these ignorant folks out here who post their little videos on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, who actually don't know anything about the law and the limitations. And so you have to create ways. That's one of the reasons why they use disparate impact. That's one of the reasons we use census tracts. That's one of the reasons when they say we can target things to zip codes. So there are ways that you have to say race on the federal level where you can't do it explicitly. There are other ways around it. That's one of the challenges that we have. And so when the Biden folks are saying what we're going to be pursuing when it comes to race equity, again, like for instance, perfect example, you talk about access to capital. We hear that all the time. I argue that if you're the federal government and you're putting federal government money in banks, you should have a provision that say, in order for us to place the federal money that are in these banks, we are requiring said banks to provide credit loans to businesses that receive federal contracts that might be in a disadvantaged category, or just simply say require you to provide credit lines to such businesses. Guess what? If you now are a Black-owned business or a Latino-owned business or whatever, and now all of a sudden you have access to capital, and now because of that simple change, it now creates a credit line for you. That's not a race-specific remedy. That's a remedy where they even say if it's for companies less than 100 million in revenue or less than 50 million in revenue. There are ways for you to create those type of programs. That's called being smart within the law.
Well, you're absolutely correct, and let's understand why it's so important to be able to draft legislation properly. Much of the legislation came out of the 1960s and 70s that was meant to address to ameliorate issues of racial disparities. Because of the way the laws were drafted, ended up having other communities besides African Americans. One of the biggest beneficiaries of Title IX, for example, was it being white women. One of the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action programs who were meant to integrate many of the Ivy League schools, for example, ended up being Asian Americans who vastly outpaced African Americans in those schools. So when we talk about having these race-specific programs, we have to make sure that it's drafted properly so that it properly addresses the needs of the community. And also, as you said, that it doesn't get struck down by the court. If we look at the holding, and when the Supreme Court struck down Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, one of the issues they brought up was the fact that the act still using criteria set out in 1965 to address voting laws and voting issues in 2014. So we have to have legislation which is drafted, which is nimble enough, and that addresses all things, not just to maintain constitutional scrutiny now, but to affect the community that needs to be affected. One more thing in conversation with Sanders, we talked about the stimulus and people saying, or Republicans more so saying, that it's too big and it could break the economy. That's not how any of this works anymore. They're talking about a gold standard form of governance and austerity model from the Chicago School under Friedman. If you look at Keynesian economics, which has been predominant much of the 20th century and into the 21st century, with the IMF and the International Monetary Fund and most supply side economists say, the bigger the stimulus, the better for bringing to prevent a recession, prevent a depression. If you look at the New Deal, the real reason the New Deal failed was it was not big enough. You needed World War II levels of spending to break you out of that negative economic cycle, which was in place from through the 1930s. So this idea of a stimulus being too big, we never talk about a tax cut being too big. Congress never found a tax cut for billionaires that was too big for them. But oh Lord, if a person wants a sandwich, all of a sudden we got to start pinching pennies and going into our pockets to see if we can find the money. Let's get rid of this idea that stimulating the economy can be too big, because at the end of the day, all this money is imaginary anyway. So let's just give it to the people who need it.
See, Monique, the thing for me is I do my best to try to ignore the grifters. The problem is when the grifters are purposely driving disinformation and misinformation to our people, and they think something can be done when it really cannot. And what we have to understand is I don't spend my time going, do this. Oh, what I go is what can actually be done. What can be done, what can get passed, what can get implemented. See, everything that can be done don't require a press release. Everything that can be done don't require a big old part. Sometimes you can do stuff and you ain't got to sit here and blast it out. You just go ahead and get it done. And I think that's one of the pieces here. And I think, unfortunately, Black people need to understand there's a reason they target us with disinformation. There is a reason. And it's even more shameful when our own people contribute to it.
But that's part of the master plan. The plan is for the cancer to eat us from the inside out. That's always been the plan. We perish for the lack of knowledge. Ignorance is not bliss. Knowledge is power. So the only answer, truly, when we have people who are on the grift or the misinformation, disinformation campaign is the way that they earn their livelihood, whatever the case may be. Their particular politician does not get in office, so then it's scorched earth mentality and everything else has to die and everybody else is wrong, and they just sit out here looking like petty betties, nitpicking and not offering any solutions. Away with all of it. I don't have time for any of it or any of them. The best resource to me is us, in that we have the power to provide real-time, accurate information, tools, tips, ways of doing things so that our people can advance. So when you have interviews like the one you had with the lovely Simone Sanders tonight, hey Simone, woo!
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Really?
You knew it was coming. Win with black women. So I'm true to this now. So when you have interviews like that on your very important substantive show, Roland Martin, then people can trust that because it's not a cakewalk. You're asking the right questions. You're not giving them a pass, but you're giving space for real answers. And that's what our folks need. And what they also need, what we all also need, like you just said a minute ago, you read a book or 1,000. I dare say you've read a book or 5,000. Leaders read. If you don't read, you will always depend on the people who do. So read for yourself. Whitehouse.gov or WH.gov. Read every single executive order. Know which ones say what. If you have questions, submit them. Submit them to people you can trust, like Roland, or submit them to the White House, or submit them to whomever until you get answers. But read first, and read as much as you can, and don't feel shame about what things you don't understand. We're all in this together, and it's gonna take all of us to get it done.
And again, here's the whole deal. If you are following somebody and their time is spent talking about what I talk about, as opposed to actually talking to policymakers, you should stop following fools like that. Here's the deal. I don't discuss them because they're not worth it. Too many of our people are getting bad information. Too many of our people are walking around people telling you this can be done when it actually can't be done, or they don't understand policy. They don't understand how laws are made. They don't understand how to even lobby. And also, last point, if somebody who you follow is now trying to have an opinion on what the Biden administration should or shouldn't do, and they the same punk asses who told you don't vote, they can go to hell. Because if you follow somebody who told you not to vote, their opinion right now don't mean a damn thing to me. And it shouldn't mean anything to you. And you sorry asses know who you are. Folks talk about Chicago. It's been nearly a year since schools were shut down due to COVID-19. Yeah, I said it, Monique. But some are slated to return to school tomorrow for its first in-person class. The city's teachers union voted in favor of reopening agreement in Chicago public schools. Months of over safety concerns, both parties were able to agree that the first and second vaccinations provided for all employees and will return in phases. Pre-K and special education this week. Elementary, middle, and high school are scheduled to come back to school in March. Watch this.
We are here to announce the very good news that our children will be returning to in-person learning this week. These past 11 months have been a whirlwind for our entire city, pushing us to limits, not once, not twice, but countless times. We've lost jobs, and we've lost loved ones. We grappled with the certainty and predictability of our lives, and been left instead with instability, uncertainty, and we've all been on a nonstop emotional roller coaster that we have individually and collectively tried to navigate a set of circumstances that none of us experienced before.
All right then, folks. You know what? I got to go quick here, Monique. It's been a lot of back and forth. The same thing's happening in Prince George's County right now as well. They're working all out. From the three of you, is for kids to go back to the classroom.
Ooh, I got an email from one of the schools for three children, three different schools. And during the virtual session today for one of my children, the lead teacher said, "Oh, Miss Presley, are you in the room, Miss Presley?" Which, how far away could I be? So I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here." And is your child going to be coming back on such and such a date? And I'm like, "Oh, I was just assuming it was going to get kicked again," because this is like our fourth start date for a hybrid type scenario for that school. I'll say, like I said the last time I was on your show, let's go with the science, because I don't believe that it is failing us. Schools that are putting the proper protocols in place are having very good results. not just for children who we know are less susceptible, but also for teachers. And it has been proven that where schools are doing it safely, the schools are safer than community at large. They're safer than church. They're safer than the malls. They're safer than, the McDonald's that's still open, or the patio cafe. But let's look at schools like DC, and that's not even the worst example. Schools that don't have the financing, the wherewithal to be able to do it properly, teachers are dying. Student numbers are up, and the teacher and staff numbers are up even higher. So I think this can't be a blanket. It has to be either the federal government is empowering and funding and superimposing funding on the states such that they can do exactly what is necessary for it to be done safely with the smaller amount of students in classes, the requirement of masks, the requirement of testing where testing is necessary, the low number of staffers, the vac systems, because the two of my kids that are in hybrid, they've spent a whole bunch of money changing the entire way that the place receives its air filtration system. And my kids say all the time, oh no, I need both of those sweaters and a coat, because they keep us like a cold in there because they've figured out how to stay alive and teach our kids. So if they're not going to do all of those things, then no, because staying alive is more important.
Robert, time for back in the classroom?
Yeah, I'm uncertain on this because we just had I think 2 teachers and teachers in Cobb County who died recently here in the Metro Atlanta area. And I understand parents' concerns. I understand the need to get students back in the classroom. I understand the dangers involved with having them outside of it. But I'm thinking of it from the perspective of a school employee. And do you really trust the same school district will not supply you with markers and magic markers and pens and paper, where you have to reach into your own pocket to provide supplies for students? I know teachers who bring children's laundry home to wash their clothes for them, bring food for children. All the things that teachers are doing already. So to trust school districts to put in the type of health and safety measures that the NFL has not been able to do, that Major League Baseball has not been able to do, that the NBA has not been able to do, that Congress has not been able to do, that the White House has not been able to do, I would have serious concerns and trepidation if I was a teacher going back into that environment. Because again, you're not getting the same kind of health care that these multimillionaires who still haven't been able to deal with this pandemic are able to do. So we have to really follow the science, not rush these things, understand the dangers involved by not going back, but also prioritize the teachers and the staff members and their lives and their livelihood, because at the end of the day, they have families they would like to go back to also. So let's not rush this.
Mustafa.
Well, this is a tough one for me. My little niece and her brother just had COVID just a couple of weeks ago. So, to have them be in a situation like that, or others should say, to be in a situation where they might be infected, is really tough. I'm just like everybody else. Everything I do is grounded in science and policy and the law. And, until we make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to make sure that folks are protected. And that infrastructure is beyond what's going on in those 4 walls of that school. You're also talking about bus drivers. You're talking about a number of other folks who are part of the educational system who could possibly be exposed and infected. They have to make sure that they have the protection in place as well. So, no 2 schools are the same. So if we can make sure that the resources, infrastructure, and science says that it's safe, I think we're moving in the right direction. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't say, we also got to address the broadband issues if students are staying home, because we got far too many kids of color who can't even learn because we don't have the infrastructure in place.
Absolutely. Folks, Wells Fargo has sponsored the pledge in May last year to up to $50 million in black-owned banks. The banks include Broadway Federal Bank, Carver Federal Citizen Saving Bank and Trust, Commonwealth National, M&F Bank, and his bank. As part of the investment, this will have access to Wells Fargo's financial and technological development to help each bank grow and benefit. Bailey, Vice Chairman of Players of Wells Fargo, stated these investments are designed to help the bank become stronger and more impactful to the minority communities they serve, which leads to economic valorization and job opportunities. Now, here's what I would like to see Wells Fargo is. I would like Wells Fargo to have an intensive assessment of their advertising agencies, the money they're spending on black agencies, black ad agencies, so black media. See, let me explain, folks, why I'm saying this, see? So think about that there. Wells Fargo announces they're going to put $50 million in blanks. But the question is, how are you also helping grow black businesses? To what I'm saying, y'all. Listen to what I'm saying. So what happens is, I'm talking about if you're Wells Fargo and you're buying tables at black events. I'm saying, how are you also investing in what is your supplier development? What is your black supplier development? What black companies are you using? Are there PR agencies, black advertising agencies, black accounting firms, black law firms, black bonding firms? You see what I'm talking about right here? See, this to me, how granular we have to get, Robert. We start holding people accountable with these announcements. And so, okay, sure, Wells Fargo sent it out. We got the press release. And let me be real clear, same thing. Netflix, they sent me a bunch of press releases touting different shows they have. I'm like, okay, that's great. But Netflix, when are y'all going to start spending money? When are y'all going to start actually advertising? Stars. Oh, y'all got P-Valley. So y'all had some Hours Remorse. Y'all got Power. Now you got Power 2, all the spinoffs. How much money y'all spending on black advertising? See, we have to be making a level of demands of companies that go far deeper. And again, I'm not just saying, ooh, black media you're supporting because I have a black media company. I want to know, are you supporting the whole black ecosystem? And I want to see, and I don't want to see the minority number. I want to see the black owned number, not the black targeted number. Because see, BT, that's black targeted. Complex, that's black targeted. I can go down the line, all the folk, the Root, that's black targeted. They ain't black owned. I'm talking about what's black owned.
You're completely correct. We have to rethink how we look at these things, because representation as an idea is a great thing. We need representation matters, but representation is passé at point. Now it's spending. So beyond not just what you were saying, how many black law firms are on retainer when you do major litigation? How many not black people who work for another law firm, how many black-owned law firms are doing major litigation for your company? How many black caterers do you have on site? How many black drivers and limo companies are you using? There are places across the board where those markets which have been historically closed to us. This is the idea of systemic racism, that because your father's grandfather started this catering company in 1932, and someone has been using the same catering company since 1932 or wherever it may be, that because we did not have access to enter that market, we're still being systematically deprived of the right to that market and the ability to compete in a meritocracy on that level. So we have to start making demands up and down the boards to create equity, not simply equality. I love seeing all the faces and the representation, those shoehorn, a neighbor in here and there just to make sure to have those diversity up. But in reality, we need to find out not just who's in front of the camera, but who's behind them, who is behind the pen and paper at the agency. Where exactly are all the funds going, and what is your commitment to diversity? Do you have a chief diversity officer? Are you recruiting on HBCU campuses? So while we have the ear of power, we have to make sure that we're making demands and make demands strongly.
Look, that's why we have the segment called "Where's Our Money?" Black economic justice. That's what this is about. And again, this is, to me, this is one piece. I appreciate Wells Fargo putting $50 million to black banks, but also I remember a whole bunch of black people who lost their homes in the home foreclosure crisis as a result of Wells Fargo as well, as a result of Countrywide, as a result of other banks. And so I look over that, because if you actually add up, remember, we lost 53% of all black wealth due to the home foreclosure crisis. That's more than $50 million. Monique.
My turn.
Yes, it is.
Yes. I agree with all of that, and I bank at Wells Fargo, just full disclosure, one of my accounts. But I'm still going to say this: I know personally of two vice presidents, prior vice presidents of Wells Fargo, who have left for other operations within the past 70 to 90 days. And they controlled diversity books, and they controlled a large business targeted at minority businesses. And I mean, you know, 250,000 and above initial investment type books for one of them, and one diversity interest lending. And they both left to be places where they had more autonomy in being able to do business with businesses and individuals that could most benefit. So I just don't think it's a coincidence. So when I looked at what Wells had decided to do, I'm like, is that a part of litigation or what? Maybe I'm jaded, but those are my 2 cents.
Mustafa, I'm laying this out because what I'm trying to get African Americans to do is to think vertical and horizontal. See, So again, perfect example. Netflix, they announced that they were invested, they were going to put $100 million into black banks. Cool. What else? See, that scene from Malcolm X, I'm not satisfied. That's one thing. Okay. But see, I want to know your commitment vertical and horizontal. I'm perfectly cool. Netflix, y'all hired Bazoma as chief marketing officer. Yay. Y'all give a content deal to the Obamas. Yay. Y'all gave the richest content deal to Shonda Rhimes. Yay. There's some other black people who have gotten content deals. Yay. But I'm going deeper. To Robert's point, I want to know, are you saying on all of the productions who got the limo contract? Who got the catering contract? Who got all? See, this is how when you start talking about driving diversity, that's when you get real deep. That's when you start saying, hey, Netflix, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, any other company, when y'all buy your t-shirts and your hats and your jackets, who you buying it from? When y'all buy the pop-up tents that you use, who you buying it from? See, that I'm talking about across the board. And what I'm not talking about is a few black folks who you promoted. I'm talking about how deep are you drilling down when we talk about diversity and spending with black companies?
Yeah, the thing that I share with everybody who I work with is be very careful of window dressing, because window dressing looks good until you pull the curtain back. And then you find out if there's really investments in the infrastructure, in the priority setting, in the policies that you're developing inside of your institution to make sure that every element has justice built into it or has equity built into it. So when Robert was talking, I'm nodding yes, because you have to look at every one of these elements and ask, are you making a commitment in space? Because it all comes back to actually being able to build wealth and build power based upon those sets of investments. So window dressing doesn't build power. It allows, a handful of people maybe to be in a better position. And we're not going to stop anybody from that. What we're looking for is that real systemic change. We talk about systemic racism, and we understand how that has dismantled and deconstructed our communities. Now we're talking about systemic investments, about how we rebuild black wealth and black power so that we then can make sure that our narrative, our stories are moving forward, and then we can help a whole bunch of other folks. So that's where my mindset is, and I'm sure it's where a lot of other people are now focusing. And we got to get even more people to understand that you actually can have power if you can work and hold these folks accountable and say, just this one-time investment is not what we're talking about. We're talking about long-term investments that actually can be quantified and that we can actually see real change happening.
Absolutely. And I just get a kick out of the people who love to whine and complain. But the question is, what are you doing? Are you doing the work? If you aren't, shut the hell up. Going to a quick break. I'm back. I'm going to talk with a sister who owns a defense company. She's really focused and investing on STEM and technology. We'll talk about that in our Tech Talk segment. Back in a moment. I'm Roland Martin.
I grew up wanting a lot of activities in my neighborhood that was in close proximity. My mom wasn't always there, so I didn't always have a ride to places. And, you want to be able to walk down the street and get to something that's some food for your soul in your community. I relished, the days of being in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and when I had to go out there and live with my people, they had actually black-owned corner stores. My uncle owned one. My Uncle Donald owned a cleaners and a corner store. And he a city councilman down there now. And it's like, that was big for him. He was like, yo, man, you got to own something. Got to own something. His wife was named Louise. It always killed me. I used to call him George Jefferson. His name was Donald. Because his wife was named Louise. And that was big to see my family own and stuff. And it just cultivated what my dad told me. My dad, it's not a lot. He didn't say a lot of good stuff, but the three things that he did give me: play chess, so you'll be a thinker. You don't have to work for nobody. He told me that. He said, you don't have to work for nobody. The same energy that you put into for somebody else, you can put that same energy into for yourself. And then he'll go into his spiel. See, they talking about black people don't want to work. Black people just don't want no jobs. You know what I'm saying? We don't work for nobody else. We want our own stuff. That's give me my own stuff. I come to work every day. You know what I'm saying? he going to his own spiel. And, like, I don't work for anybody.
Hi, I'm Gavin Houston.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
All right, folks, my next guest started a company called STEMboard, which creates systems and solutions for federal and large-scale private sector clients. Aisha Bowe, a former NASA aerospace engineer, founded the company in 2013 in order to make a difference and create opportunities to get young people engaged in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also known as STEM. Now, according to Inc. 5000, STEMboard is one of the fastest growing companies in America. She joins us now. Aisha, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Roland?
It's great to see you. So let's, first of all, before we talk about the company, let's talk about you. Look, double degrees, University of Michigan, but you were not one of these brainiacs, always a straight A student, and you was a perfect student. You actually have a story that when you talk to young folks, you can identify with as somebody who through stuff, but again, got it together and now is in a position to really impact and change lives.
Yeah, so I like to consider myself the accidental engineer. I started my undergrad in aerospace engineering with pre-algebra in a community college. I was what you'd call truant in high school because I was not focused. I had no career aspiration. I was just trying to find a way to feed myself. I just wanted a job. But it was in community college that I discovered a love of math and science that would propel me to complete an undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan, which is one of the top 4 best aerospace schools in the country, and eventually a master's in space engineering, and earned me a role at NASA in Silicon Valley, working on small spacecraft and supporting the aeronautics mission director.
And so, as somebody who had to really lock down the focus and really chart their path, why'd you go this route? What was it? What was the thing about getting 2 Ds as a real rocket scientist? People are like, I'm not a rocket scientist. Well, you actually are.
Yeah, so it was this idea that everything I thought about myself was wrong. For so long, I felt ashamed because I was Black. I felt guilty because I was poor. I felt like I couldn't achieve because people like my guidance counselor said, hey, I think you should be a cosmetologist. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. That was all that she thought that I was capable of doing. And so once I entered the community college environment and I started to realize, hey, maybe everything that everyone told me about myself was wrong, I was determined to be everything that I thought was audacious. I wanted to live a big life. And so I said, hey, I'm going to go to the University of Michigan because you know what? I don't think I could get in. I'm going to study engineering because I love math and science. And if I'm going to study aero engineering, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer because I think that's the most incredible thing that I could do with my life. And I did. And since then, I've been on this mission to help people challenge what they think is possible for them and their lives.
So you went this route, then you went to go work for NASA, but then you left.
Yeah, and when you leave a government job, your family will think you're crazy. Like, listen, I love my family, but when I said to them that I was going to leave my government job for a company that I was going to create, they thought I lost my marbles, Roland. Like, it was just like, it was a non-conversation. Are you kidding me? You're an aerospace engineer. You're a rocket scientist. You're just going to go? But yes, I was going into the community and I was talking to kids in schools on behalf of NASA. And I would show up and I would say, hey, I am really excited to talk to you about this small spacecraft mission. Or I'm really excited to talk to you about what I'm doing in flight trajectory optimization. And they would look at me like, you're an engineer? You're kidding. I mean, I literally had my degrees in my trunk, Roland, and I would pull them out and I would show them to the kids to prove that I got the degree and I was supposed to be there. And there was something about that to me that was like, this is wrong. We as a society need to normalize minorities in these fields. And I'm going to start a company that's not only going to do that, but that's going to do something better than that. It's going to be impactful, and it's going to provide engineering services to the U.S. government in a way where we can have national reach. And that's what's become STEMboard and eventually Lingo, our at-home self-paced coding kit that's being used by thousands of school kids right now in America, including some HBCUs, to teach computer science.
And so with that, how has that gone? And what has been the reaction when you bring kit to young people?
So I love Lingo. Our clients include Microsoft, GE, we have Fayetteville State, we've got Bowie State, and a number of other HBCUs that we're working with. And one of the most touching pieces of input I received was from a student who sent us an email and said, this is the first time that I've seen this subject taught by somebody who looks like me. That instructor at Lingo is a woman by the name of Danielle Regis. She's double degreed from Cornell, and she takes the students through the activities with passion. We tie it to art, we tie it to music, we tie it to fashion, because guess what? I never thought I was going to be an engineer, and I don't assume that you want to be one. And so our content is designed to engage. It's designed to say, hey, this is how you can use this to do something that you're really passionate about. Just stay tuned. We're going to teach you how. And we also provide all of the material within our kits to make sure that students can not only build our lesson, but they can continue to tinker at home. And so we're getting input from 13-year-olds that say, hey, I just did this, I didn't need parental support, and I've built self-confidence. I'm seeing students say, guess what? I thought engineering was really boring, but watching you guys makes me think differently about it. And I'm also hearing from parents and teachers that they're enjoying our content because we align to national learning standards. We created a curriculum framework, and we made it easy for organizations to build capacity while leveraging our content.
Before I go to my panel with questions, one of the things that I always say is that you have to make something accessible and easily digestible for somebody to say, man, this is not bad. And so is that the approach you take as opposed to people who sit here? Because I take it if you walk into the room, they go, hold up, you ain't an engineer. But you walk them through that so they understand that, no, this thing is not as hard as you think it is. But let me just sort of explain it to you and put it in a different way that might get you excited about the field.
That's exactly right. I mean, our example is not, hey, let's show you how to do some calculus. It's let's teach you how to build a backup sensor for a driverless car, right? You've seen a Tesla. You've heard the noise that cars make when they back up. You've probably ridden with your mom or a guardian. So you get that basic concept. So we're going to show you how to build that. And what you're going to see from us at Lingo is our follow-on lessons are around music and sports. We're getting ready to release a kit that shows you how to make your favorite beats with a microcontroller, which I call internally Trap Lingo. Like, I want you to pull your favorite music from Megan Thee Stallion or whatever it is, just a few bars, not enough for us to worry about any type of copyright issues, but just a little bit of a melody so that you can play it on your board and you can see how, wow, all of a sudden this thing that seemed foreign is actually something that is applicable to a career field that I want to go into. And oh, by the way, it's not as hard as I thought it was.
I got a feeling Mustafa is geeking out right now. So Mustafa, I will go to you with the first question.
First of all, thank you for everything you're doing. I'm actually the son of an engineer, so numbers used to scare me when I would see what he was doing. But I know that you have had some incredible experiences with young people. Is there one that just kind of stands out that made you say, I'm moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I never thought that I was a role model. And I can remember meeting a girl named Claire when she was 13 and she walked up to me. I had a aviation museum in Northern California, just kind of fulfilling a spirit request. And she said, hey, I want to be an engineer when I grow up. I want to be an aerospace engineer. And so I gave her my card and listen, I've given out so many of these NASA cards. If you call me, great. If not, great, right? And she sent me an email and she was so enthusiastic that I invited her in. And that one day turned into her coming back for a shadow day. It turned into her becoming a NASA intern. And now she's graduating from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with an aerospace degree, and she's going to work for Blue Origin. And she said to me, Aisha, I never doubted that I could do it because I saw that you did it. And from that experience, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it bigger. I'm going to do it again. And I'm blessed that I run a contracting company where we've been in operation now since 2013. We're leveraging the U.S. taxpayer dollar to invest in the infrastructure and that's necessary to make a long-term change in how we educate minorities and women in America.
Next question, Monique.
Oh, I don't have a question. I have a person.
Okay,
Here she comes.
Do you want to elaborate?
Here she is. I've got your next one. Hi. Homework. This is Grace. Grace has a life in tech that her mother never could have dreamed. Say hi to everybody. Hi. But especially to this rising queen right there who's doing big things in tech. She's gorgeous, right? Okay. Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. We need you.
Oh, thank you. Roland, I mean, listen, can I come back? Because this is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my show. I ain't got to ask nobody. That's what happens when you own your shit. Robert, what's your question for Aisha Bo?
All right, on a your story about the guidance counselor struck me because literally almost word for word, the exact same thing happened to me. I went to Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville in high school, and when I came back, I told my guidance counselor I wanted to go to MIT and be an airbase engineer. They asked me I want to go to technical school to work on air conditioners, and that's the last conversation I had with them on the subject. Right now, you mentioned Blue Origin, so there's a whole renaissance in private rocket companies, everything from Blue Origin, SpaceX, of course, and many of the other countries, Electron, more than anybody can count. How can African Americans work on moving into this new and growing field? Because we just saw Jeff Bezos step down from Amazon to focus on low Earth orbit, and then eventually the new Glenn going for moon missions and so on and so forth. So there's going to be $1 trillion economy that for the most part we are shut out of on the front end. How can we work on remedying that?
So I love this question because if you look at venture capital and large investments, 75% of that funding is concentrated in just 3 states, right? New York, California, and Massachusetts. But when you're talking about Blue Origin, when you're talking about SpaceX, guess where they are? They're in Florida. And when you have states with a high concentration of Black, Latinx, and female graduates with STEM degrees, such as Florida or Georgia, and they also have an affordable cost of living, that's key. So what I would like to see is more investment in these areas that already have that population, as opposed to investments where they would kind of require that that population moves to them in order to be part of their workforce and potentially even acclimate to their culture. The other thing that I actually have thought is maybe a perk of the pandemic is this idea that you can now work where you are, right? I mean, it was a really big deal for me to move before we feel more welcome. And so this is an opportunity for these companies to say, hey, we can tap into this talent pool, which we all know is existing, by working with these HBCUs and organizations that are designed to cultivate this talent directly, and allowing them to stay in environments that are familiar to them and it can support their academic as well as professional growth.
One of the things that I was just talking about is this idea of business, and again with contracts and race equity as well. And I want people to really listen to what I'm about to tell y'all right now. Because I think, Aisha, too often, again, we're not understanding how these dissect. If you look at Elon Musk, worth billions on the use of federal taxpayer dollars, federal contracts, state giveaways. Donald Trump's daddy made all of his money federal housing contracts. And so it's important for us to obviously, and most important, to amplify what you're doing because, and let me be real clear to everybody listening. I need everybody listening what I'm about to say. What Aisha had laid out is not a damn nonprofit. Why am I saying that? Because there are too many people who want us as Black folks to give our expertise away for free. when others are earning millions and billions on the same expertise. And that's important to say because we have to have African Americans also advocating for folks like Aisha when you're trying to get those contracts, when you're trying to get contracts from other agencies, because that builds your business. And if Aisha Bowe grows her business from 10 to 20 to 50 to 100 to 500 million to $1 billion, imagine how many black children you now can impact when it comes to the area of STEM. That's what I mean when we talk about how we have to connect the dots and use each other's platforms. And just so everybody understand also what happens when you own your it. I went to dinner with Aisha and a friend of hers who's a friend of mine Friday. She's on the show today. Not MSNBC, not CNN, but this is what happens when we are black and we own. We get to make decisions on what we do and how we control our dollars. Now you can go ahead and respond.
Roland, look, you know that the federal government spends so much money, right? In 2019, $4.4 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars was spent by the government. And one of the things that I'm excited by is that the campaign outlined a $400 billion plan to support small businesses and tackle inequities in the federal contracting system. This is likely to increase the dollars that are going to go to small and minority-owned businesses. But guess what? There aren't enough small and minority-owned businesses. These are opportunities that people need to begin to prepare themselves for now. And one of the things that I want people to take out of my story and my time with you is that what I did isn't rocket science. You can start a company that is a small minority-owned business, and the government has resources that are designed to support you, and you can grow without taking outside capital. Everything that was accomplished, from the lingo kits to our operation, was done by bootstrapping through using government contracts to generate revenue. We are not a nonprofit. We choose to use our profit for good, and that's a decision that I can make because I, like you, own. But it's important for minorities, women, African Americans, veterans, disabled community members. Please know that these opportunities are available to you in the U.S. federal contracting system.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Aisha, you're doing a great job. Is there anything that I do to assist? Certainly let me know, and I'm sure there'll be more great things that we will be seeing and hearing from you in the future.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Folks, that is it for us. Wrap this thing up. Did I get some mail today? I think I did. I don't know where I put it. Okay, all right. I'm going to read the letter tomorrow. For our Bring the Funk fan club, I want to support what we do. Y'all know how to help us. Please join Bring the Funk fan club. Your dollars make it possible for us to do this kind of show, to provide a platform to folks like Aisha, to be able to get the story out, get the word out with what she's doing, the great things that she's doing. And, of course, to feature commentary. Folks are loving you on YouTube and Facebook, Robert. They say you've been real spicy lately. Somebody said, are you eating spicier food or something? They said that you had oxtails before the show. I'm saying what the folks are just saying there. So, again, the opportunity to have Robert and Monique and Mustafa on the show to be able to offer commentary is critically important, folks, as we able to have our expert voices out here. Because if you watch cable network right now, you swear black lawyers don't exist. I mean, you just swear they don't exist, but they actually do, and we feature them. All right, folks, support us via Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is paypal.me/RMartinUnfiltered. Venmo/RM Unfiltered. And, of course, Zelle is smartin.com. Also, shout out to Latasha Brown, Cliff Albright. I'm rocking Black Voters Matter today. So they always hook me up with gear. So we're out on the road, of course. I had to, and matter of fact, y'all, I know it's cold. So, you know, I told them, I said, we got to do it right as well. So, you know, when you're out there and, you know, and it's freezing, so you got to represent even when it comes to the beanie as well. And so I appreciate that. And they're the ones who we reached out to when we bought our gear. They hooked us up with the company as well. Folks, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow's day. We look forward to seeing Greg Carr, Reed, and Erica. Thank you so very much, folks. We'll see y'all tomorrow. You know how we always end the show.